My name is Michael, and I still remember that night, as if it happened yesterday. I was sitting in the hospital waiting area, and the clock on the wall felt louder than my own heartbeat. Every tick was cutting through my chest like a knife. My wife was inside the delivery room, fighting for her life and the life of our child, and I was outside helpless, just holding my head between my hands, wondering if this night would break me forever. People think that waiting is easy, but the truth is, waiting is torture. You sit there and you imagine everything that can go wrong. You see shadows in every corner. You hear cries that do not exist, and you start bargaining with God. You say, God, take everything from me, but save them. You say, God, punish me if you want, but give them life. I kept whispering these words again and again, like a prayer, like a curse, like the only thing holding me together. I was 32 years old, and in that moment, I felt like a small child who had lost his way in a crowd. My hands were shaking. My throat was dry and my legs were numb. But my mind was racing through every memory I had with her. The first time we met, the way she laughed when I told her a stupid joke the day we got married, the way her eyes shone with dreams. All those moments were dancing in front of my eyes like a cruel slideshow. And I asked myself, would tonight be the end of our story, or the beginning of a new chapter? The nurses kept walking past me. Some had files in their hands. Some had trays with instruments. But not one of them looked at me. Not one of them gave me an answer. And that silence was killing me. More than anything, I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to grab their shoulders and say, tell me, is she alive? Is my baby alive? But my lips were sealed because I was afraid of the answer. I was afraid of the truth that might come out. My phone kept vibrating in my pocket. It was my mother calling. It was my brother calling, but I could not pick up because what would I tell them? I had nothing to say. I had no answers. I had no strength to pretend that everything was fine. So I just let it ring again and again, the sound echoing in my chest like a reminder that I was alone in this war. Minutes turned into hours, or maybe it was only minutes, but time had lost its meaning. The hospital walls were white, but to me they looked like prison walls. The chairs were hard and cold, but I did not even feel them anymore. I was locked in my own head, drowning in my own thoughts. I kept staring at the delivery room door, waiting for it to open, waiting for someone to come out and say words that could either save me or destroy me. Then finally, after what felt like eternity, a nurse came out. Her face was serious. Her eyes were tired, and for a second I felt my soul leave my body. She looked at me and said, "We are trying our best. Please pray for her. Please pray for the baby." Those words cut me in half because they were not answers. They were warnings. They were like fire thrown on my chest. I fell back on the chair, and I felt tears running down my face. I did not even try to stop them because they were stronger than me. I remembered the night before she went into labor. She held my hand and said, "Michael, promise me you will be strong. Promise me you will never give up, no matter what happens." I smiled at her and said, "Of course I promise." But inside, I never thought I would have to prove it. I never thought I would be sitting outside counting every second like it was my last breath. As the night grew darker, the waiting area grew colder. People came and went. Other families laughed when they heard good news. Other families cried when they heard bad news. And I was still there, stuck in the middle with no ending of my own. Every cry I heard made me jump. Every laughter I heard made me jealous because I wanted my turn. I wanted my news. I wanted to hold my child and tell my wife that we made it. Hours later, the doctor finally came out. His coat was stained. His face was pale, and he looked at me in a way that made my stomach twist. He said, "Michael, we are facing complications, but we will do everything we can. You need to be strong in this moment." Those words broke me again, because they were not clear. They were not yes or no. They were maybe, and maybe is the most painful word in the world because it keeps hope alive, but it also keeps fear alive. I stood up and I walked toward the small window on the side of the corridor. I pressed my forehead against the glass and looked outside. The city was asleep, the lights were dim, the streets were empty, and I thought to myself how strange it is that the world goes on. While your own world is falling apart, people are sleeping. People are dreaming, And here I am, standing between life and death with nothing but prayers in my hand. That night, I promised myself that if my wife and child came out alive, I would change everything. I would stop chasing meaningless things. I would stop wasting time. I would stop hurting the people I love. I would dedicate my life to them. Because nothing else mattered. Money did not matter. Status did not matter. Ego did not matter. The only thing that mattered was seeing their faces again, hearing their voices again, feeling their heartbeat against mine again. The clock on the wall kept ticking louder and louder. My heart kept racing faster and faster, and my soul kept whispering one thing over and over. Please, God, let me hold them. Please, God, let me see them. Please, God, do not take them away from me. And that is how my night began. The longest night of my life. The night that tested every part of me. The night that forced me to face my deepest fear. The night that decided who I would become from this moment onward. When the nurse left the corridor, felt emptier than before. The words "we are facing complications" kept spinning in my head. I sank back into the chair and watched the fluorescent light buzz above me. Every small sound felt like a drumbeat counting down to something I could not control. I thought of the promises I had made the night before. Promise me you will be strong. Those words were clinging to me like a lifeline, yet strength felt like a thin thread ready to snap. Time lost all shape. The clocks became useless circles on the wall. Minutes melted into each other. I tried to breathe slowly, but each breath felt like glass in my chest. I folded my hands and spoke to the quiet room, as if speaking could change the air. I told the ceiling about our plans, about the name we had chosen, about the late night talks about small things that had become our life. I talked to the empty space because saying the words made them real, even when the world was holding its breath. Then the phone in my pocket started buzzing. At first I ignored it because I could not carry another voice of worry. But the vibration was insistent, heavy, as if it carried its own urgency. Finally, I pulled it out and saw a number I knew too well. It was the office. The name on the screen belonged to the project I had chased for years. My palms sweated, and my heart gave a curious lurch at the sight of the caller. There was a voice on the other end, before I could think. The pitch was high with excitement and fear. They said, "We have the final approval. Tony wants the signature. Now we need you to sign electronically before the morning. The deal is live, and we cannot delay." My mind slammed into two separate worlds. One world was the white door behind which my wife was fighting for life. The other was the boardroom, and the contract that could change everything I had built. The voice kept speaking, but the words turned into a hum. I could not focus. I felt like a man standing at a fork in the road, with both paths burning behind him. I could imagine the headlines in my mind the next day. The office celebrating a deal closed at midnight. My picture next to a success story. The kind of moment that writes your name in bright letters. The kind of success everyone applauds. Yet at the same time, I could also imagine the hospital corridor and my wife pale under bright lights. The tiny life whose first breath I had not heard yet. The thought of missing that first cry felt like a wound opening in my ribs. My hands trembled as I listened to the voice repeating the technical details, the time window, the electronic signature. I excused myself and stepped away. I needed air. I needed space to think. The corridor outside was cold and smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. I pressed my forehead against the cool wall and let the call continue in my ear. In the minutes that followed, I felt my life laying itself out like a map, and I could see the cost of each choice. If I signed the deal now, I would secure the future we had imagined. The child would grow in a home where bills were never a worry. We would travel. We would give the child every chance I had always wanted to give. But at what price? The image of my wife alone on a table, the bright lamp over her, the doctors moving like ghosts, the fear of the unknown, the idea of choosing money over a heartbeat made me feel like a traitor to my own vows. The phone call became a test, and not the kind you study for. It was the kind that sits on your chest and asks if you are the man you say you are. People always tell stories of those impossible choices as if the answer appears like a light. But real life is messy and noisy. The contract sounded like salvation and like a blade at the same time. I could hear the office breathless in my ear. They said this client has been waiting for years. This signature would pave the road for promotions and for security. They said one click and everything changes. They did not know my life was being measured in heartbeats at that moment. I could have given them 100 reasons, technicalities, and logistics, but I knew myself. I knew how easy it would be to rationalize away the one true thing that mattered. I think many of us have that voice that makes trades in the dark. It argues that work is family too, that securing the future now is a gift for those you love later. I almost swallowed that argument, and then I felt my chest tighten, as if a second heart was telling me to stop. I put the phone down and closed my eyes. I could see my wife from the early days when our life was simple and the future was a long road. We walked hand in hand. We had planned names late at night. We had argued about colors for the nursery. We had laughed about small things that made us feel like we had built a universe. Those memories were fragile and precious. I thought about the promise again, and I remembered the look I had promised to return. Her hand squeezed mine, and she had said, "Be strong." At that moment, strength felt like an offering and not like a bargain. I could not sell that moment for the warm applause of an office. The thought of missing a life beginning because I signed a file far away felt like a betrayal to the vows I had whispered beneath a smaller lamp. I stayed at the wall, and then a nurse came out with a face that did not yet show sorrow, but carried tiredness. She said, "We need a blood donor for an urgent transfusion." The tone was clinical and quick, and my heart pounced in my throat. I did not even think I stood up and followed her without asking questions. The hallway to the donor room was a blur. The small room smelled of disinfectant and lemon. A man sat on a chair, his arm wrapped with tape, and he looked at me with a strange calm. The nurse said, "Do you have blood type O negative?" My mouth opened, and I realized I did not know my own blood type. And the nurse smiled and said, "If you do not know, we will check." She explained that a sudden drop in the mother's blood pressure had forced them to order emergency transfusion to stabilize her. My hands were shaking again, but this time with purpose. I thought of the contract and the office voice and the nights of reports and spreadsheets. I thought how easy it would be to say, "I am sorry, I cannot do this now. Please delay it. Sign it in the morning. The world will not fall apart." But then I looked at the man who had already been through giving and looked at the needle on the tray, and I felt the truth again. That some things are immediate and without negotiation. Life does not wait for signatures. Life demands presence, and it asks for small sacrifices that are sometimes the most human acts we can make. While they drew blood, I sat and watched the centrifuge spin and separate my life into small tubes. Like pieces of me I had never held before, the nurse said, "Your blood may reach her faster than any form or any signature." She said, "Sometimes the simplest acts hold the most power," and I thought of the office and of the millions the contract would have promised. None of it mattered in that white room with a rubber band around my arm and a small label with my name and a date. I felt a strange peace. The fight to be present was not about heroics. It was about being true to the moment. They wheeled the pack of blood down the hall as if it were a small red boat carrying hope. I watched the doors of the delivery room close and open like lungs. I wanted to be inside so badly that my hands ached. Yet I stayed in the waiting area because the protocol wouldn't let me follow the bag. A doctor stepped out and nodded to the nurse. The bag vanished behind the door, and for a brief second, I believed that life was returning with it. Then the doctor reappeared, and his face was graver than before. He said, "We have stabilized her for now, but the baby is premature and may need intensive care." The words premature and intensive stuck to the walls and made the air heavy again. They told me to wait. They said, "Please do not move from this chair." They said, "We will update you every hour." Every time a sentence like that left a mouth, I felt grateful and terrified. Time became a meter, measuring small victories. A stable pulse on a monitor was a victory. A small cry was a victory. Then nothing. For a long time was an enemy. I found myself counting not minutes, but breaths. Counting breaths like rosary beads that would take me through the night. Strangers in the corridor offered coffee or a blanket, and I accepted their kindness like a currency that kept me from falling somewhere between waiting and watching. My phone buzzed again with a short message. It was the office with a single line that said, "Contract signed by proxy. All good. Congratulations." The world had moved on, and my work had been done without my hand. A strange mix of relief and loss washed over me. I had imagined I would be the one to sign and to receive the triumph. Instead, they had found a way to click a button without the soul of the moment being present. The contract existed, and my family had a future that looked solid on paper, but the weight of the moment had not shifted. If anything, I felt lighter, because the heavy decision had been made for me. Yet inside, there was a small ache of a path I had nearly taken and had turned away from. As dawn approached, a nurse opened the door and said, "The baby has arrived, but he is in the neonatal unit. The mother is stable for now. You can see them both, but only for a few minutes." Those words felt like sunlight cutting through a long night. They walked me to a small glass room where a tiny figure lay under a warming lamp. The baby was smaller than I had imagined, and yet perfect in a way that made my heart expand and break at the same time. My wife lay pale but awake, and when she opened her eyes, they were full of the tired light we both recognized. She smiled at me and mouthed the name we had chosen. I held my child, and his skin was so small and fragile under my fingers. I felt a sharp and fierce love that was immediate and whole. The tubes and tiny machines hissed and blinked around him. Nurses explained that he needed time, and that the smallest changes were a victory. My wife's hand found mine, and our fingers intertwined like old ropes. We did not need words, only the small, steady presence of each other. I thought about the contract again, and realized the absurdity of choosing papers over the sound of a tiny chest learning to breathe. In that warm box of light, I felt my priorities rearrange themselves without effort. Money and deals seemed like distant noise compared to this living weight in my arms. The days that followed were a blur of monitors and small triumphs. The child fought like a brave thing, and each gram gained felt like a medal. I slept in chairs and in the corner of waiting rooms, and I watched my wife recover a little at a time. The office sent congratulatory messages, and later a director came by with flowers and a brief handshake. The world acknowledged success, while my world had already changed. I learned that choices are not always dramatic gestures that the world applauds. Sometimes they are simple acts like staying and bleeding and waiting and signing nothing at all. When the baby finally came home, I packed a small bag with the tiny clothes we had bought and the watch I had promised myself to buy. And I walked out of the hospital not as a businessman, victorious in a deal, but as a father with a small life sleeping on his chest. The contract would matter in the years to come, and it would open doors and pay for schools. But the night I chose presence over a signature would stay with me as a proof of who I had become. I had held two fragile things at once, a family and a career, and I had learned that sometimes the truest success is the one that does not make a headline. From that night onward, I changed my work habits. I learned to carve boundaries. I learned to tell the office that some moments cannot be moved. It was not an easy lesson, because the world is loud and money persistent. But every time I looked at my child sleeping soundly, I found a new patience. The papers would be there, the contracts would come and go. But the first cry of my child and the look in my wife's eyes were singular and could not be invented back. If you ever find yourself at a crossroads where the world asks for a signature and life asks for your presence, choose the heartbeat that is in front of you. The papers can wait. The mornings are many, but the first minutes of a life are one. And if my story touched even a small part of you, then please like this video and subscribe so you can hear more stories that sit on the edge between choice and love. The doctor's words kept echoing in my ears. Complications. We are trying. You need to be strong. Those phrases were heavy like stones on my chest. I sat back down. My body felt weak, but my mind refused to stop. The hospital corridor smelled of medicine and silence. Families moved around me, some smiling with relief, some breaking down with grief, and I was stuck in the middle with no ending yet. I kept staring at the delivery room door as if my eyes could break it open. Then my phone vibrated again. This time it was my boss. I knew why he was calling. There was a big deal waiting. My signature could decide the future of my career. For 1 second I thought about it. But then I remembered her voice. "Michael, promise me you will be strong." Strength was not about papers and signatures. Strength was about being here, holding on when life was falling apart. I let the phone ring. I could not care less. Moments later, a nurse came rushing toward me. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "We need a blood donor. The father, if possible." My chest tightened, but I stood up without thinking. Finally, I could do something. Finally, I was not just sitting helpless. They took me to a small room, prepared me quickly, and I felt the needle slide into my vein. As the blood left my body, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Take this from me. Take everything from me. Just save them." When they were done, I walked back to the waiting area, my body weak, but my heart stronger. For the first time that night, I felt I had stood beside her in some way. Now, all I could do was wait again, but this time with the feeling that I had given a part of myself to bring them back. The minutes after giving blood felt heavier than the hours before. My body was tired, but my mind refused to rest. I kept walking back and forth in the corridor, counting every step like it was a heartbeat. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow felt like news waiting to unfold. At last, the door opened again, and this time the doctor walked out slowly. His face was unreadable, and my soul froze. He came close, looked into my eyes, and said, "Michael, your wife is stable now, and your baby is fighting strong." Those words broke me open. I fell back against the wall, tears rushing down my face, but this time, they were not only of fear, they were of relief. I whispered thank you again and again, not to the doctor, not to the nurses, but to God, to life, to every unseen hand that had carried us through the night. They let me in after a while. The room smelled of medicine and sweat and survival. My wife was lying weak but alive, her eyes half closed. But when she saw me, she smiled faintly. That smile alone was worth more than every success I had ever chased. Beside her lay the tiniest form I had ever seen, wrapped in white, fragile and beautiful. My child, my blood, my hope, my second chance. I touched the little hand, and it curled around my finger as if to say, "I am here. Do not be afraid." In that moment, I understood everything. Life is not about the things we run after, the things we lose sleep for. Life is about the people who make us who we are. That night, I promised myself again that I would never waste a single day, never let ego or greed stand between me and my family. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand, watching our child breathe softly. For the first time in hours, I felt my own breath return. I felt whole again, broken but rebuilt, scared but grateful. And as I share this story with you now, I only want one thing. If you felt my fear, if you walked with me through this night, if you touched even a part of this journey, then do not forget to like this video and subscribe. Because many more stories are waiting, and maybe the next one will remind you of your own fight, your own love, your own reason to keep going.